Good morning, friends. So, we were studying interferons and the mode of action we have already discussed. Now, we are going to discuss the next the next topic in this unit, that is hypersensitivity. As we know that we often use the term allergy, that is altered state of reactivity. Whenever the person becomes very sensitive, or whenever the person reacts with the antigen in exaggerated manner, so that type of reaction is said to be hypersensitivity. Means the person is more sensitive to that particular antigen or allergen. So we often use the term allergy also. In this particular topic, we are studying what is hypersensitivity, what are different types of hypersensitivity, then type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4, these 4 types of hypersensitivity reaction with their examples and mechanism. Immune response is actually beneficial to us, beneficial to human body, and it is generally developed towards the antigen, towards the foreign antigen. And whenever the response is developed, that response is said to be immune response because it protects the body from infections. In certain situations, what happens? The immune response to common antigens damages the body. Means instead of protecting the body, it harms the body. And such type of response which is harmful to us is called as hypersensitivity or allergy. Allergy, it represents the altered state of reactivity. So we often use the term allergy. The first time the term allergy was coined by von Pirquet in 1906, which means against protections. Hypersensitivity develops with the entry of certain antigens in the body, which brings about sensitization of immune cells. And whenever for the second time the same antigen enters in our body, the same antigens give damaging response either immediately or after some time. So we can classify hypersensitivity basically into two main types, immediate and delayed. Immediate type of hypersensitivity refers to the development of allergic reaction or response immediately after the introduction of antigen. Sometimes there is a delay for development of reactions, and that is termed as delayed type of hypersensitivity, where we observe the symptoms after some time. Reactions may vary from local inflammatory reactions to most serious reaction resulting in death. So for the first time, von Pirquet in 1906 coined the term allergy, which refers altered state of reactivity, and this develops during the entry of certain antigens. So you might be knowing that whenever the person comes in contact with certain allergens, for example pollen grains, for example dust particles, for example smoke, as well as certain chemicals, certain types of clothes, even certain types of food items. So whenever the person comes in contact with this type of the antigen or allergen, we can say the person develops allergic response. Means it shows some different type of reaction on its body, and then we can say it is a hypersensitivity or allergy. So the reactions or the symptoms may include sometimes inflammatory reactions, as well as sometimes the bronchioles get contract, smooth muscles get contract, as well as we observe certain wheel and flare reaction on the skin. So different types of the reactions are there, different types of symptoms are there. So the symptoms vary from inflammatory response to most serious complications may also develop, that may lead to death of the person also. So it means that the hypersensitive reactions may vary from local reactions or inflammation to more serious complications resulting into death. Now we are going to study here major classification of the hypersensitivity, that is Coombs and Gell classification of hypersensitivity. So you should understand that whenever we classify hypersensitivity, then we have to consider the mechanism firstly. What type of reactions are there? So depending upon the reaction, depending upon the type of the antibodies involved, Coombs and Gell have classified hypersensitivity reactions into four types: type 1, type 2, type 3, and type 4. Okay, so type 1 hypersensitivity represent immediate type of hypersensitivity. Here we observe that immediately, that means as soon as the antigen enters in our body, so immediately there is a development of response, development of certain types of reactions. So it is immediate type of response. So it is called as immediate type of hypersensitivity. In case of certain cases, the reactions to develop or to appear or the symptoms to appear, it requires some time period. So there may be delay in the response, in the development of reaction. So that type of reactions are called as delayed type of hypersensitive reaction, where some time period is required upon entry of the antigen. Upon entry of antigen, it may be necessary that subsequent entry, or it is necessary to develop the response later on, and therefore they are called as delayed type of reaction. Okay. So in case of type 1, it is observed that why they are immediate type, there we observed typical antibodies are there. Which are antibodies? IgE. So IgE antibodies are there, and these antibodies are responsible predominantly for the development of immediate type of reaction. IgE, we know that whenever we classify the antibodies, IgG, IgA, IgM, IgD, and IgE. So we know that IgD and IgE, they are kept in below in the list because they are, that means their percentage is also most negligible, as well as immunological significance is also not so much. But in case of Ig antibodies, these are reagenic antibodies, and they are having ability to go and bind on the master cell surface on basophil also, and these antibodies are responsible for development of certain mediators, and these mediators are actually bringing about the changes, and some symptoms are developed due to these mediators. So IgE antibodies are responsible for developing type 1 reaction, where we say anaphylaxis, asthma, urticaria, or nettle rash, or hives. So such type of the reactions are there, which comes under type 1 type of the reaction, type 1 hypersensitive reaction. We will see one by one the reaction and mechanism. Then type 2 hypersensitivity, it is mediated by IgG and IgM. So now you understand that here different immunoglobulin classes are involved in different type of hypersensitive reaction. In first type, IgE will be predominant. In second type, IgG and IgM, these antibodies or these immunoglobulins are predominantly involved, and due to these antibodies, there is a type 2 hypersensitive reaction. So here we can say the example of blood transfusion reaction like that, where we are going to transfuse the blood, where we are going to transfer the blood from one individual to other individual. That comes under type 2 hypersensitivity reaction. The blood is not properly, if it is not properly get matched blood groups, then there may be some serious complications after the blood transfusion. So we know that before the transfusion of blood, donation and recipientation of the blood, then we should properly match the blood group of donor and recipient. And if the blood group of donor and recipient get properly matched, then only we can transfuse the blood, otherwise no. That means the donor can donate his blood to recipient, recipient can take the blood from the donor. But prior to that, we have to match the blood properly, whether it is having A, B, and O, then we can transfuse the blood. So it is one kind of hypersensitivity. Whenever the blood group is not properly matching, then there may be some hypersensitivity reaction, so that we will study later on. Type 3 hypersensitivity reactions are mediated by immune complex. Immune complex means antigen antibody complex. When the antigen comes in, when the antigen is get introduced in our body, it stimulates the production of antibody. So there is a complex formation, antigen antibody complex formation, and this complex is said to be immune complex. So whenever there is a formation of this immune complex, then type 3 hypersensitivity reactions can develop. The example will be Arthur's reaction and serum sickness. So these two reactions, serum sickness means after the inoculation on the foreign serum, there may be some development of symptoms which includes the fever, or there is a rise in body temperature like that. So that type of the symptoms is there after following the injection by the foreign serum. So it is serum sickness. So Arthur's reaction, serum sickness, these are the two examples of type 3 reaction, and the basic mechanism involved is the formation of immunocomplex, that is antigen antibody complex. And the fourth type will be type 4 hypersensitivity reaction, which is the delayed type, which is also known as delayed type of hypersensitivity reaction, which is actually mediated by T cell. Now you will understand, from type 1 to type 3 we discussed that there is a involvement of immunoglobulins or antibodies. Sometime IgE are there predominant, sometime IgG are predominant, IgM is predominant. So likewise here T cells are predominant. Means in delayed type of reaction, thymus dependent cells or T cells are predominantly involved, and they are mediating the type 4 or delayed type of reaction. Whenever there is involvement of immunoglobulins or antibodies, we observe the response immediately. So all this type will be included in immediate or immediate type of reaction. Where the T cells are there, T lymphocytic cells, there is some time period is required to develop the symptoms on the reaction, and therefore it is said to be delayed type of reaction. Now we will discuss with example and what is the mechanism behind the hypersensitivity reaction. So type 1 we will discuss first. Now you understand what is hypersensitivity. Whenever the person reacts with the antigen in very exaggerated manner, it is hypersensitivity, or we can simultaneously we can call it as a synonymously you can say allergic reaction, where the altered state of reactivity is there. When the person becomes very sensitive to certain antigen, then we call that the person is having allergy to that particular antigen. The allergens may be pollen grains, the allergen may be smoke, the allergen may be dust particles, sometimes food particles or food items. So different types of allergens are there. So when the person comes in contact with certain allergens or antigen, the person reacts with that antigen in very exaggerated fashion. That is, some different kind of reaction he shows on the body, and that is the hypersensitivity. Pollen grains are also sometimes allergic to the person. So they may be different, the allergens may be different, because the person becomes so sensitive to that antigen that the person showed some different kind of reaction on his body, and then only we can say the person is having allergy to that particular antigen, or it is called as hypersensitivity reaction. So one is the type 1, first one will be the type 1 hypersensitivity reaction. So here we know that IgE are responsible. In previous, that means in just now we discussed that. Previous slide we discussed wherever immunoglobulins are responsible. So IgE antibody is responsible for development of type 1 reaction. So what happens here in type 1 hypersensitivity reaction? There is a maximum or overproduction of IgE. So we know that particular immunoglobulin is having specific concentration in the serum. For example, IgE having 35% concentration in serum. IgA is below that, IgM is below that, sometimes 23%, sometimes 10% like that. So it means that these antibodies are having specific percentage or normal value in the serum. Here IgE and IgD, these two immunoglobulins are having very negligible concentration in the serum. But here in type 1, we discussed that here there is an overproduction of Ig, means the Ig antibodies are produced in more amount. So there is an overproduction of Ig antibodies, and the antigen is called as allergen. The antigen is called as allergen. For example, pollen grains, dust particles, dandruff, smoke, chemicals, certain food items. There are some examples of allergen. So here we can say sometime the person becomes hypersensitive to pollen grain also. Whenever he comes in contact with the pollen grains, he shows different kind of the symptoms or different type of reaction. That is the that may be sneezing or anything. Some skin rashes may be there. So some different kind of reactions are there. Abnormal type of reactions are there. So these allergens are responsible. These allergens means pollen grains, smoke, food items, dust particles, certain chemicals. So these are called as allergens. The allergen means these are the type of the antigen which elicit, which is responsible for allergic reaction. So whenever the person is coming in contact with such type of allergen, the person becomes so sensitive to that particular allergen, and so sensitive in the sense the person develops immunity against that antigen, and such people are said to be atopic allergy. Atopic allergy means very strange type. So whenever the people do not respond normally to common antigen by producing Ig, commonly or when the foreign antigen comes in contact with our body, we produce either IgG or IgM or IgA naturally, but never we produce Ig antibodies, remember. So Ig antibodies are produced when the person is allergic to particular antigen, then Ig antibodies are produced there in maximum amount, in large concentration. So here what happens in type 1? What is the exact mechanism behind type 1 hypersensitivity reaction? So that means two steps are there following. One is the sensitization phase. When hypersensitivity type 1 reaction develop, two phases we observed. First phase is called as sensitization phase, and second phase is called as effector phase. Sensitization and effector. So sensitization phase, this represent during this phase the allergen enters the body and stimulate the immune system for production of Ig antibodies. Means firstly the antigen comes in contact with our body, and this antigen is going to stimulate the production of Ig. When Ig antibodies are produced, what happens? These antibodies are reagenic, means these antibodies are having ability to bind on the cell surface. So these antibodies bind to master cell surface and basophils. After then, the allergens like pollen grains, snake venom, as well as mold spores, as well as certain food items, animal hair and dander, certain vaccines, and foreign serum proteins, they bring about sensitization. Means the person may have allergy towards pollen grains, may have allergy towards smoke, or may have allergy towards certain mold spores as well as food items. So whenever the person comes in contact with such types of allergens, then the person becomes hypersensitive, because these allergen means snake venom, food items, pollen grains, smoke, dust particles, these allergens, they are going to sensitize the mast cell or basophils. That is the sensitization phase. And then antigen specific Th2, means T helper cell 2, becomes active, and it activates B cell also to divide it into plasma and memory cell. And then there is a production of Ig antibody. Means what happened? In sensitization phase, firstly, the allergens sensitize the allergen center in our body and sensitize master cell and basophils. Th2 cell get activated. Th2 means T helper cell 2 also activate B cell. Later on, B cell get proliferate into plasma and memory cells. Plasma cell going to secrete the antibodies. Which antibodies? IgE. So there is a production of IgE antibodies later on. And when the IgE antibodies are produced, these antibodies are going to bind on the master cell surface and basophils later. What happens here? The basophil, we know basophil, neutrophil and eosinophil. These are the blood cells. So they are having granules in their cytoplasm. They are called as granulocytes. So the cytoplasm of basophils and master cell is filled extensively with the granules, and these granules contains mediators. These mediators are called as pharmacologically active mediators. So whenever the basophils and master cells they are produced, they get degranulated upon binding of Ig antibodies with their Fc portion along with antigen or allergen. And when antigen plus IgE antibodies get bind to master cell or basophil surface, then there is a degranulation of the mast cell. And after degranulation, the cytoplasm and granules will release, and simultaneously there is a release of mediators, pharmacologically active mediators. And whenever these mediators are released from the cell, these mediators are responsible for development of certain symptoms of hypersensitivity reaction. These mediators means which mediators? For example, histamine, serotonin, eosinophil chemotactic factor, platelet activating factor, as well as prostaglandin, kinin, slow reacting substance of anaphylaxis. So these are the certain factors or mediators which are releases. And whenever these mediators are released, histamine like or serotonin like substance, they are responsible for bringing about the contraction of smooth muscle. Sometimes they bring about vasodilation. So these are types of the results. These type of the effect are seen due to release of mediators. And after releasing these mediators, when these mediators brings about total effect, then we observe the typical symptoms on the body. So later on we observe the effector phase. The first phase is the sensitization phase, where we see that there is a sensitization by the antigen or an allergen to the cell, master cell or basophil like cell. Then these cells get sensitized. After then B cell get proliferate into plasma and memory cell. Plasma cells secrete Ig antibodies. Ig antibodies are reagenic. They are going to bind on the master cell and basophil, bringing about their degranulation and release of mediators. So after releasing the mediators, the second phase follows, that is effector phase. The effector phase occurs upon subsequent entry of the same antigen or allergen. So when the same antigen comes in contact with the person for the second time, then we observe the effector phase. The sensitized master cell and basophil release mediators, and these mediators are of two types, primary and secondary. The primary mediators mostly includes histamine, neutrophil, eosinophil chemotactic factor, tumor necrosis factor and serotonin. These are called as mediators. Mediators means these are certain chemical like substances. So primary mediators are there, secondary mediators are there. Primary mediators, which are primary mediators? Primary mediators include histamine, serotonin, eosinophil chemotactic factor or ECF, neutrophil chemotactic factor, as well as tumor necrosis factor. So these are all includes under primary mediators. So this is regarding the mediators which are releases during the hypersensitivity reaction. In the next slide, we will discuss the other types of the mediators and the whole mechanism behind the type 1 reaction, type 1 hypersensitivity reaction. Thank you.